So we're going to assume that you're here today because you want to learn about how to develop a business case to financially justify your social business initiative. We've developed this presentation not to be one of those general overview flyby type of presentations, of which many here that are excellent, but really here in delivering this to you is to give you a template, something that you can take back to help you develop a business case yourself. Say that as a member of our business value assessment team, that's what we do all day long for a living. IBM with you and your organizations in a no-fee engagement. We've been doing this for about 8 years now. We've done it for well over 1,000 organizations, half of which we've developed business cases. So again, you'll see some of these charts are quite detailed, but my intention here is to give you, again, a template so that you can go back. You don't have to memorize everything I say or take notes. The questions, the benefits frameworks, pretty much how to do this are in these charts. So what I'm going to do first is just set real quick business. This isn't new area as it was a year ago when I developed this presentation. And then just kind of give you an intro business case. Primarily, we're going to focus on benefits identification. Let's start, first of all, level setting on social business. And as you've probably understood at this point in our conference that social businesses are characterized by some specific features that are distinguishing them from other organizations, and primarily engaging or activating their networks of folks in order to let their expertise. And by doing so, they gain a superior on that time invested. You also have probably come to understand that these social businesses are characterized by being engaged, agile, and probably, my experience, most key innovation. It's the innovation that we are hoping to capture and quantify in the business case. These social businesses here are also characterized by people-centric processes, but you kind of think about that. It's like, well, isn't that within our organizations? But these people-centric processes are very engaged, transparent, open, and are more richly and deeply connected than traditional business, which is we find are very siloed, lacking transparency, not only across their organization or their respective lines of businesses, but across all lines of businesses. And so let me now start with the business case fundamentals, and we'll dive into this. And my objective is to take you from a top-down approach, how you might go about this business case. So first of all, I want to say that when this case, it's not going to be solely about the quantitative. The obvious quantitative, the paybacks, is typically what we find ourselves measuring and helping customers quantify. Payback, valuation metrics, return on investment, those kind of things, break-even analysis. That's what we typically think about when we start considering building a business case. Especially when it comes to social business or collaboration, I'll use those interchangeably. The qualitative aspects of building a business case are quite salient and quite material, and often are the showstoppers. Because I've listed a bunch of things up there, such as strategic fit, business processes, what else do I have? Critical success factors. And then sort of one up there, sort of in broad intangible. It's that intangible that's going to get you everything. It's the intangible that's called culture and governance. Very, very key to your social business initiative, but very, very difficult and often excluded most times. All right, now again, as I said, we start from a macro perspective. I start top down, and we use this metric scorecard over and over again. It's very easy to use, pretty fundamental and straightforward in the way that we look to, going into building a business case, we look to structure the business case along this framework where we know we're going to look for direct or quantitative benefits, such as revenue optimization or cost takeout. Or we're going to look for, we're going to look for semi-quantitative or more qualitative benefits such as user experience, user engagement, customer satisfaction, things that are typically more characterized by key performance indicators or strategic impacts. And then last but certainly not least, the operational efficiency metric. And that has been, as I said, in the last couple of years as I've worked increasingly around building business cases for social initiatives, operational improvements, what I call this, operational efficiencies. That's kind of my working hypothesis, that I'm able to build a business case around productivity and improvements. So kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. The bottom line there, I call this aligned investments. This is one also that has become a very familiar character for me as I go through this exercise of building a business case. And that comes in the flavor of, really it's a cost reduction, also known as shadow IT. And I'll kind of give you a hint on, how to go about quantifying that. That benefit in and of itself will often financially justify moving forward with a social business initiative. In fact, I just finished a large BBA, again, went in there working hypothesis of, okay, operational efficiency, there's just tons of opportunity to improve efficiency. Well, working with the CIO, he's like, I'm not going to tell you what I've already estimated this to be, but yes, we think there is a material shadow IT spend out, and sure enough, we were able to estimate that. He was in alignment with our measurements. So let me break this down just quickly. I'm not going to belabor this, but again, this is more of a sheet to kind of remind you. What I want to really bring to mind here is sort of the benefits, as I said, revenue improvements, such as improve cross-sell, upsell, reduce customer retention, things that are going to line. That's typically what we think about when we think about hard benefits or quantitative benefits. These are budget line item takeouts. And interestingly enough, these are non-strategic. These are the benefits, however, that will move your justification forward. Vana of your finance colleagues, they will always say, absolutely, I want a direct hard dollar benefits case. But remember the qualitative side of the benefit. These are often short-term in nature and semi-quantitative and qualitative benefits. So now we're moving along the spectrum away from short-term tactical type benefits in your business case to a quantification of benefits that are more strategic. If we go all the way to the end of the spectrums, I refer to this as the table stakes game. It's music to my ears when I'm working with an organization who says, we got to have this. We absolutely got to have it. Our senior management, our key stakeholders are in agreement, but I need a business case. Probably heard that yourself. So the table stakes argument is that strategically, I need this to stay in the game, right? It's table stakes for me to stay in the business. All right, so that's helpful to know, but still have to create a business case. So now let's talk about how other organizations do it, how we do it. We have the benefit of long-term experience in doing this. So I'm going to share with you sort of a knockoff of our best practices approach. And I would encourage you to use this approach. It's tried and true. It's delivered results hundreds of times for us. And again, just as a little plug here for the BVA team, if you would like help, we would be glad to come assist you. We have some business partners here as well. Hi, Jim, who also have many other business partners who work with us to create these business cases. So if you look at this laundry list here, and this is not quite the eye chart that you're going to see yet, but there are a lot of words up there. I don't want you to have to take notes or remember all this. It's not till I get to the very end of this list of to-dos that you start that I start talking about, okay, let's identify benefits and costs that we're actually going to quantify. Because in our experience and our practice, the identification of those benefits is predicated on consensus, building consensus among your stakeholders as to what the business is trying to achieve, right? So you might say that's a great idea theoretically, but with whom do I build consensus, right? So that's the first part of the exercise, is to identify what I'm going to call social hotspots or collaboration hotspots. And I'm going to give you the benefit of our practice of doing this. As you'll see subsequently, there are lines of businesses that are more likely to engage and to have the proclivity to apply social business capabilities against their business objectives and challenges. So now, having identified your collaboration hotspots, your key stakeholders within those, you're going to have a little discussion with them to help you understand what their business objectives are and what keeps them up at night. What are those challenges associated with what they are trying to achieve? So having gained a better understanding then of what your business counterparts are trying to achieve, we apply then, or I'm going to propose you're going to apply the possible business, social business solutions against those business objectives. So that's the alignment exercise. So you bring into focus capabilities that you're going to endeavor to quantify the benefits of. So then, having done the alignment, you have an idea of now, or you have a bucket of potential capabilities that will reduce these objectives and challenges. We're going to go about identifying associated benefits, and then in your ideal world, if all goes well, we're actually going to be able to quantify those benefits. Okay, as I said, there are lines of businesses that we've found in doing this. As I said, we've been focusing quite a bit on this in the last 3 or 4 years. There are 4 lines of businesses that we find are candidates. So if you have, if you've, and we hear this quite a bit as well, probably 50% of the organizations with whom we work, they come to us and say, oh my God, I've been designated the social business czar, or here's a new role, and now I have to oversee the implementation of social business in my organization, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Here's a good place to start. These areas research has proven: sales and marketing, customer service, products and service innovation, one other one, and HR. So both a little bit of internal-facing processes or internally focused lines of businesses, as well as external lines of businesses. So very, very process-rich in terms of being able to identify benefits where the application of social businesses can be derived. All right, now we're getting into my eye charts here. I kind of shirk a little bit. I chided my colleagues, no bullet points on your presentations, no bullet points. And then I looked at my presentation and I thought, oh my God, I got hundreds of bullet points. So I'm not going to go through this. As I said, you can download this and go through the detail. But this, I hope, this slide and the next slide will help you in your own identification of what you're looking for. To remember, like, oh yeah, I got to get consensus. I need to identify those lines of businesses, my key stakeholders, what they're trying to achieve, what's keeping them up at night. So I got that. So now I've gone in there with the objective that I'm building this business cases. So what kind of questions do I need to ask to elicit the feedback such that I can build a business case that's going to be relevant to my business stakeholders? And it's there that you're looking for things like, or you're probing and inquiring about things like team dependencies. How many meetings, how many cross-functional or cross-disciplinary teams are involved in doing A, B, or C. So that's an area of focus. Information intensity, how often? So again, already you're starting to hopefully discern a pattern. Time. Time is going to be your friend in terms of being able to add quantification to your benefits if you can reduce time. Because remember, my working hypothesis is efficiency. So if I can reduce time, improve operational efficiency, I can often then translate that into a measurable business benefit. So here again are some candidates that you can research. Additionally, especially with regards to social business communication habits, this was a fun one to discuss. You know, are we talking email? Are we talking phone? Are we talking web conference? Are we talking travel? Again, we're looking for time, frequency, and dollar cost associated with this. And then last but not least, it's related, but it's not necessarily governance, but it is kind of a cultural aspect. You know, what's the technical acumen of your respective stakeholders? Is there a proclivity? Is there a willingness? Is there an appetite? What's out there for adoption of social business? All right, so now having set the stage a bit, let me take another 4 or 5 slides before Palma comes up here and address how you can personalize the benefits. Again, kind of costs off to the side, this kind of high level, just so you know, when I'm developing business cases in our practice here, when we're developing them, on the cost side, I'm looking for, as I said, I'm not trying to send a man to the moon on my math. I am trying to be directionally correct. I'm trying to answer the question, is this investment in social business directionally correct? And so to that end, got some colleagues in here who can testify. When I go to them and ask for derivation of the cost side, plus or minus 20% often suffices. I've had customers who said plus or minus 50% works for me. So 3 components: software, hardware, and services. Kind of want to get a high level plus or minus 20% for the cost side, assuming you're going to do a return on analysis or a payback type of quantitative valuation assessment. If you just need a directionally correct indication on the benefits side, you don't have to do the due diligence around the cost side. So let's talk about the benefit side for the remainder of my time here. So the name of the game here is customization, right? Personalization. And I got some good news and bad news here. The bad news, if there is bad news, is that there's a bit of subjectivity involved here. It's an art. And for a lot of us who are from an IT background, a quantitative background, we get a little uncomfortable when it comes to, oh, I got to be artsy around this. You do kind of got to be artsy around it. But the good news is there's a lot of help. And what I'm going to do here, what we're going to leave you with are these templates and these benefits that you can take from all of the other presentations. And I said in 4 or 5 yesterday, I'm going to give you some examples of general metrics that have been provided and documented by sources such as McKinsey and IDC and Forrester, these kind of things. You can take these general metrics and use them to customize or personalize your own benefits case. And I'll show you how to do that. That's the good news. Okay, so let's start here making it personal. I already talked about this a little bit. The notion of gaining consensus among your stakeholders who are going to help you championing this and take the business case forward. So you need to have a one-on-one conversation. We like to have a one-on-one conversation. These are typically decision-maker type stakeholders, folks who are comfortable with the strategic direction of your organization within their respective departments. And I'm there to essentially ask 3 questions. What are you trying to achieve? Also known as, why do you come to work? What keeps you up at night with regards to work? And then how are you measured? And so within that last question, how are you measured, there's the process component again. Are there process areas in your respective line of businesses that are suboptimal or broken or and we don't necessarily at this point even have to be talking about social business. I want to get an understanding. You want to get an understanding of what's driving the business. Because again, you want to bring home a solution that's salient to what the business is trying to achieve. All right, to help you do that, we've included in this documentation here a couple of charts here. The first one are common business objectives. So whereas both Palma and I can attest to this, and there's another one of my colleagues in the back, we've sat in hundreds and hundreds of interviews, hundreds. And out of hundreds of that sample size, maybe 2 come to mind where the interviewee stopped talking before the hour was up. It's not a problem here. So again, for all of you introverts, it's not an issue here. Go in and talk to somebody about why they come to work and what keeps them up around work. They can talk. Now, if they are a bit reticent, here's a starter kit, if you will. These are common business objectives that we have collected over the years, and we hear these over and over again. So, for example, in HR, if you need to get the conversation started a little bit, to jumpstart it a little bit, you can inquire about the objective issues around attraction and retention of talent. Is there an aging workforce component here in the organization? Are there challenges around onboarding? So sample questions. Around customer service, that's always material to an organization. Are there cost issues? Are you measured on costs? Are you measured on productivity? Are you measured on customer sentiment? Those type of questions. Likewise, for product innovation and sales and marketing, pretty much, I was going to say they're always relevant. Let me just take, for example, sales and marketing. As I said earlier, I go in oftentimes, certainly when I'm working with government and, let's say, education clients, I go in with the thinking that, all right, this is going to be more around cost takeout and process efficiency. And, revenue, the rest of the for-profit organizations, it's a no-brainer. We're here to be in business. We're here to make money. So revenue attainment, revenue optimization is definitely going to be on the list, right? But not so for government or higher ed. Wrong. I just completed this BBA for a very well-established old university here in the United States, very much academic focused. Didn't have a clue in the world that revenue would end up as a key business objective. Wouldn't you know? It was one of the 4 top objectives. Why and how is that? This is a not-for-profit institution, but they are looking to gain, and they could give me the material. I want to grow from 60 to 100 million in donor funding this year. They had numbers for alumni contribution. They had numbers for grants. So always interesting conversation. It's helpful to have that working hypothesis, but sales and marketing, anything to do with revenue optimization is going to be your friend when you're building the business case. Now, against those business objectives is, as I said, part of the personalizing and customizing the business case. You want an understanding of those associated challenges. So I said, what keeps you up at night? With regards to work, sometimes I have to throw that caveat in there because I'm like, no. Let's just talk about work here. In this case, these are some of the collected challenges that we've experienced over our tenure of doing this. And with regards to social business, they're typically around things like, transparency. Remember at the outset, I was defining social business as being as a transparent organization. It's very, very common. It's just, I think it's evolution of the business model as we know it today, especially in the larger organizations. We're very, very siloed. It's kind of a fact of life, and it's one of the material benefits, attributes of social business to break down those silos. So that's something that we hear often, and it really can bring an organization to its knees. And that comes across not only in operational efficiency, but cost reductions. I've heard not one, but multiple research-based product and service manufacturing companies talk about the redundancy that's crippling them in terms of bringing their products to market. Is that Malaysia doesn't know what San Jose has done, and they've recreated the wheel not once, but 4 and 5 times. So these are kind of examples of challenges that we hear. HR, you've probably heard in attending other sessions here, that's a very, very common business area, sort of an internally focused line of business where social business is relevant these days. And everybody's heard legions about the aging workforce, the digital native, the arrival of digital natives, that whole spectrum here. So there are a lot of challenges that HR is wrestling with these days that can help you in building the business case. These last 2 slides around measurable impact, because at this point hopefully you're getting kind of comfortable thinking, okay, I can do this. I can at least structure the framework of how I might identify a benefits framework for my business case. But I still don't know how. But I need dollars. I've got my CFO is pressing on my back, and I need dollars. So you need to ask those questions. You need to find out how am I going to measure these? Well, I'm not going to go into every question here. This is your cheat sheet, this one and the next page, but I want to give you a few takeaways. You need to focus. You need to find out simply by asking, point blank. Got some colleagues back that we've become very good at asking, what are you measured on, right? So what is the lever for your respective business unit? And those are the types, it sounds pretty straightforward, but that's it. That will simplify your world. If your sales and marketing VP is measured and compensated on growing revenue by 10% that year, voila, that's music to your ears, because then you can take the general statements, the general metrics that are just prolific here among at this conference, and start asking what if scenarios to yourself. What if I could increase revenue by 2%? What if I could reduce waste or cost by X%? I can apply those generals to the specific. All right, another way to formulate these questions, and again, I've given lots of examples here of specific questions that you can ask. But let's go back to our role-based focus, which has kind of been a theme here on this presentation. I've suggested 4 or 5 business areas that we find are very, very common to garner stakeholder support and to begin your building of the social business case. So you can look at it specifically and ask questions by these roles or these lines of businesses. Now, when you look at some of these questions here, another theme comes out, and these are again these time-based questions. So how much time are you spending developing sales and marketing collateral? How much time are you spending attracting and onboarding your talent? How much time are you spending on an average customer problem resolution? These time-based things ideally can be applied back and translated to the objectives that you've identified by asking of your key stakeholders. So lastly here, before I turn it over to Palma, we've come all the way now from using the valuation scorecard, that metric scorecard that I introduced at the first. And I've given you lots of variations on the theme, but we'd like to think a very structured way to get to what we call here the benefits framework. So this is a way now that I've taken that general metric scorecard and personalized or customized my benefits framework. And from this point on, I can quantify, or sometimes this suffices as the business case, is that I have personalized the identification and application of benefits by these respective quadrants in the valuation scorecard. So let me give you a couple examples just that have come to mind here as I've sat in other presentations here at this conference. So let's take revenue optimization. So you've identified, you've heard from your stakeholders that a key business objective is to reduce customer churn or to grow revenue by X%. I heard the other day yesterday in one of the presentations, the Internet Goes Social, that research has shown, and I can't recall who the source is, but it's all documented. You can download these presentations that when a customer makes an online purchase through a mobile channel, the conversion rate is increased by 2%, and the transaction itself is increased by the amount of 20%. All right, so there's a benchmark for you, and so you can use that to ask the what if question. What if, I know my organization is given the imperative to grow revenue, what if I could increase, or we could increase by the application of our mobile and social channels, our transactions by 2% and increase those transactions by 20%. That's pretty straightforward math. I think it's even like on the arithmetic level. Excel is your friend there. Okay, there's an example. Another statistic that jumped out at me, I saw this in a couple of presentations, the retail. I would suggest that if you're a retail organization, Kirsten Kelly and Marianne Johnson, colleagues of ours, did a fabulous presentation about social and retail, and it's just loaded with all sorts of statistics. You can take those statistics, and now that you've identified your benefits, apply the what if questions. What if I can increase my productivity by 10 to 30%? So you can apply that to pretty much any of the benefits here. What if I can reduce onboarding time by 10%, by 20%? And then you can rationalize that and revisit some of your assumptions with your colleagues who've helped you identify these benefits. So far so good. What I'm going to do next then is turn it over to Palma, and she's going to take you through some more examples and then a case study. So before I go, any questions?
We're going to go through a reference model and then case studies. Again, these are for your convenience to download and use as you go forward. After looking at the interview process, we take a look at what kinds of benefits a group would have. Now, most companies have sales and marketing organizations, they have HR organizations, they have external customer interfacing. So you may not hit all these different points within an organization. There may be, your sales organization may be the most important place to hit first, the HR organization. So you don't need to cover the entire enterprise in order to be able to cost justify or even benefit justify an introduction of technology. The most important thing here is to identify the actual benefit in the way that the business side of the organization will understand it as opposed to the IT organization. So as Mary Bird was talking about, there are incremental revenues, incremental marginal margin increases, and cost avoidance. So converting your customers from pilots into full-paying customers is an incredibly important piece. How important is that to actually establishing an ROI? Improving your customer retention. It costs less to keep a customer than it does to go out and find a new one. What is it that's going to have an impact on those pieces? And also in terms of cost avoidance, training costs might fall into here. How much does it cost to actually train your sales team or or get them traveling where they need to go. How much could be done on a web-based environment to reduce margins, but also to maintain a cost structure that is more relevant for your organization. Human resources, enabling your staff, reducing costs. Onboarding and offboarding are incredibly expensive activities. Many customers say that it takes 2 years in order to get rid of a non-performer. So how you go about interviewing people, bringing them on board, using that initial time to really evaluate whether or not they're going to make it, making all those processes easier is part of this social agenda. The main thing here is bringing tools to a transparency with your new hire, for instance, or with compliance that people are needing to follow on business guidelines or whatever else, to make sure that you're actually being effective in conveying information and making that information immediately available for decision making. Most of us, I'm sure, have gone and sat in our new jobs, whether they are new assignments or brand new organizations, and sat there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, learning how to get into the organization and become productive. So one of the key points here in reducing costs is increasing the time to productivity. And how do you do that? So when you're talking to your customers, you're going to be hearing about your stakeholders' challenges around these areas. Product innovation, the reason why you have product is to have a revenue stream, right? So how are you going to grow that revenue? How are you going to reduce the cost to get it out the door, to get it maintained? And where are your efficiencies in exchanging information? How much information is lost on a regular basis? And trust factors come in here. If you have a group in Texas that's doing some part of the development cycle, another group in Seattle, another group in Vietnam, another group in Dublin, how are you going to build the trust factor that allows people to say, yes, if I communicate this piece of information, it is actually going to be used, and I'm going to get feedback that something more efficient could be done. That was a hallway conversation of the 20 years ago. That conversation doesn't happen anymore in the hallway anyway. A lot of people work from home. How are you going to cut through those and still maintain that kind of productivity that you all need? There are unintended consequences that you'll never capture, but you're trying to find, at least tease them out on what kinds of elements here would bring a higher efficiency to your production staff. Customer service. In the customer service area, people get very nervous. Companies get very nervous. They don't know if they should have a chat environment for customers to get into their customers, as customer service reps. How will that affect the customer service experience? Will they constantly be interrupted? Is it more efficient than the telephone? What effect will forums have on my life in customer service? These are things that they're scared about innovating because they're scared about what the cost will be in terms of human resources, but also the cost in terms of managing the information that comes through the door. Will it be abused? Will it be out of their control in terms of compliance? These are kinds of questions that you'll get in terms of the interview process, and you're going to be listening for these kinds of things so that you can address them in terms of the benefits Yes, you may have a more compliant issue, but you also have better transparency into your organization, and it becomes a better brand out there. What value is that brand? So these are what you're trying to elicit as you're talking to people. So now I'm going to go through and explain in one particular case how some of these issues were addressed. So we typically have three elements of our methodology. There's the business value assessment, which relates, it characterizes the business needs with the technology and where the value is. The day in the life, which visualizes a demonstration of technology that in the business context, and then the business value, business case, which is usually with numbers. You'll see that in this particular group, the level of person interviewed is all at the director and above level, manager. These people know the business, they know what the measurements are, and they have their jobs are usually leveraged against those objectives. So they're very personal objectives. That's not to say that the doobies can't be interviewed. They absolutely can. They can give you very good insight that the management may not be aware of in terms of barriers. But it is very important that you understand how important these business objectives, because these are the people who are going to actually write the check for the technology that you want to introduce. After finish talking to people, you need to look at what the patterns are and tease out the goals. A lot of times you'll get some very specific goals, but you can't put in 20 goals into this analysis. You want to be down to 3 to 5. If you have less than 3, it may not be rich enough. If you have more than 5, it gets, people can't absorb it. It's a little bit too hard to really quantify. So solving problems faster, improving time to market, and attracting a talented workforce is, in this case, the 3 that we were looking at. So underneath these main goals, there are a set of sub-goals. How do you solve problems faster? Why would you want to solve problems faster? Improve the time to market, maintain satisfied customers. There are challenges that are being applied within an organization to actually achieving those goals easily. If they weren't a challenge, you wouldn't be talking about them. You aren't there to talk about things that go smoothly through the organization and don't need to be addressed. So you are going to be talking about problems, and you want to characterize those. Too much email. You can't search email. All of our expertise is sitting on a shared drive that nobody else can get to. Somebody goes out sick, and we've lost an amazing amount of human capital that we can't recover. Those kinds of situations present collaborative opportunities. And what we do on the right-hand column is try to identify the kinds of technologies that may be applied to address those challenges that have been brought up. So each of these create a set of goals and objectives and challenges. And you want to present these to your stakeholders and get everyone nodding and saying, yeah, that summarizes my life quite well. Once you have organized that and you've organized your opportunities for intervention, you want to be able to say, okay, within this organization, what is it that is most important? And of these technical interventions, the profiles or instant messaging or whatever, you want to lay it out with what you've learned where in the business it's going to have the biggest impact, what are the barriers for actually achieving those deployments. And you can, in our case, we generate this visual, which shows us what is the easiest to implement, which is at the 5 scale, and what has the highest impact, which is at the 3 scale. And those are the first things that you probably would be acceptable within an organization and most easily absorbed. Then we take these 3 steps, which is the goals and challenges, you know, where the highest impact on the organization probably would fall. And then we take the cost-benefit analysis off of the benefit tree that we showed earlier. And here, there are a lot of benefits for this organization. But not every benefit needs to have a dollar associated with it. You want to pick a handful of high-impact areas that you can actually apply a dollar to. Time savings and a value creation. A lot of companies don't measure everything that they ought to measure. This should not stop you from figuring out, using some industry methods and things like that, that they may be able to improve their revenue stream or their HR onboarding. But the important thing is not to get hung up on counting everything. Having some benefit is definitely more easy than every benefit to absorb. So once you have identified these areas, it's important to look at conservative, sort of a moderate, and also a very aggressive, depending on how the customer wants to see growth, or they want to see cost containment, and how realistically they may be able to apply it. Don't forget, 2% of growth is not a bad number. It may sound small, but if you save 15 minutes a day of a manager's time, it actually adds up to a great deal of time over a course of a year. And if you're paying that manager $100,000 a year, that does end up to be a lot of money. So on an organizational basis, you're trying to show that with a minimum amount of actual impact on time and energy, you can actually save a lot of money or generate a lot of revenue. And then we generate very nice pictures that show them where these savings might be. And these are all things that would be taken to board meetings, to the CFO, and other groups within the customer site to help justify throughout the stakeholder population why this effort should go forward. So that's the end of that. And are there any questions? The other thing is that you don't want to lump all your benefit and growth and whatever into year one. You're going to have a 10% adoption in the first year. You're going to have a 25% adoption in the second year. You're going to, you know. So you want to make these fairly realistic and go at least 3-4 years out for the roadmap.